This number will surprise you. Would you believe that Wi-Fi speeds from the first version to the new Wi-Fi 7 have increased by 4,000 times? And even just between Wi-Fi 6 and 7, speeds have increased 5 times. Imagine cars speeding up by 5 times in the last 3 years. It's insane to think about it in those terms, but when you look at a Wi-Fi 7 system today, you're going to pay a premium, and the assumption that Wi-Fi 7 will help you over and above Wi-Fi 6 or 6E is in some cases false. That's why I built today's video. I'll walk you through our real-world tests for speed, reliability, and coverage as it relates to the latest Wi-Fi standards. But of course, here on Automate Your Life, I like to arm you with the knowledge you need to make the best decisions. Now I have to say, these results surprised me, and they might just surprise you. So let's give her. Hello Automators, thanks for tuning in again. I'm Brian from Automate Your Life, and my goal on the channel is to save you time and money on your journey to live smarter. Thank you to TP-Link, who sponsored today's video by sending us the 2 Wi-Fi systems you'll see us talk about mostly today. It's great to work with companies like TP-Link who let us make educational content rather than just sell you their gear. Now today's video is part 2 of a 3-part series that we're doing to help you upgrade your network in your home. So if you feel like you need more help with that, check out the links in the description for those other videos. I'll be referring to them a few times. Give me 2 minutes to go through the basics of Wi-Fi. This should help our results make more sense to you later in the video. Wi-Fi stands for wireless fidelity, and it's a wireless networking technology. It uses radio waves at a certain frequency called a carrier frequency. That carrier frequency is the number that you always hear about, like 2.4 gigahertz. The frequency is how fast the wave oscillates every second, and hidden within that oscillating signal is your data, like your email telling your boss off or that guilty pleasure show you're streaming.
Next week on My Wife is a Goth Clown.
Gross. Now, embedded within that wave are the ones and zeros that processors use today. So those waves are hiding digital information within them, and they're being sent and received by radio transceivers through antennas. These radios will be embedded in routers, mesh systems, phones, computers, and so on. Wi-Fi doesn't mean you have a connection to the internet. For that, we apparently need to pay a monthly fee to an internet service provider, and then they give us a modem. That modem provides the security requirements that they have for getting you onto their network. It also transfers the signal usually from an Ethernet cable to a fiber or a coax cable that leaves your home. Wi-Fi in our homes is IP-based. You've probably seen addresses like this inside of your own network or even for websites. It's kind of how the whole system addresses things, and the fact that Wi-Fi is IP-based means we can use things like network switches, routers, APs, mesh, and Ethernet cables to connect the rest of our home together. And with that modem and the connectivity provided by our overlords, the ISP, we can get all our gear to the internet. But back to Wi-Fi. A lot of people associate the different Wi-Fi standards with those frequencies, but the frequencies themselves have some properties. We all think of Wi-Fi at 2.4 gigahertz being exactly at that frequency, but that's not the case. Regulatory bodies in each country have defined ranges for each frequency. For example, 2.4 gigahertz actually goes between 2.412 and 2.477. That range is then broken up into smaller frequencies called channels, and each channel has an associated bandwidth. Now, the bandwidth is how wide the channel is, and actually that has a great effect on how much data can be sent through at one time. We can see 14 channels on Wi-Fi at 2.4 gigahertz, but in North America, we only use 11 of them. This is how it looks using a 20 megahertz channel bandwidth, but you'll notice that the 2.4 gigahertz frequency actually has up to 40 megahertz channels. Now it's funny, we don't often use that at 2.4 gigahertz, and it's kind of unfortunate because it could help us with some things. But what happens is 40 megahertz channels at 2.4 gigahertz end up overlapping each other and causing a lot of interference. So why does that option exist? Well, channel bandwidth is best described like cars on a highway. If you're on a 2-lane, traffic's gonna slow down quickly with just a few cars. However, if you expand that to a 4-lane highway and you eliminate some of the poor drivers out there, then you can get a lot more cars driving at full speed. So when we see 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi with a 320 megahertz channel bandwidth as a maximum, we're talking 8-lane superhighway. Now, channel bandwidth is a great example of the technology improving over time, and there are a few other things that affect speed, reliability, and even coverage of your Wi-Fi. You'll hear terms like MIMO, data density, or QAM as we now go through some of the differences between Wi-Fi 6, 6E, and 7. There are some big differences between these standards, and just to calibrate ourselves, you'll see the different standards referred to in a few different ways. It's confusing and messy that Wi-Fi 6 and 6E are sometimes labeled the same, but it's usually AX and then for 6E, AXE. Now, the maximum speed of these standards really changed with Wi-Fi 7, but you'll notice that Wi-Fi 6 and 6E didn't change in terms of the theoretical maximum speed. What did change between these two are the available frequencies. So 6E Wi-Fi gives us 6 gigahertz, and that carried into Wi-Fi 7. The overall distance that these different standards cover doesn't change. What drives the different distances is more about the frequency being used, and I'll show you my test results later, but 5 and 6 gigahertz are not going to travel as far as 2.4 gigahertz, at least while using Wi-Fi. It's more likely that those higher frequencies are interfered with by materials around your home. So there are some drawbacks to the higher frequencies being used in newer standards. From a channel bandwidth standpoint, Wi-Fi 7 has the most available, but in the real world, it's a little different. You have to check your end device. For me, I had to check that my Google Pixel 8 actually could do the full 320 megahertz channel bandwidth. I talked to Google and they said it couldn't be done, but someday it could get a firmware update. Still, this is an important improvement with Wi-Fi 7. Now, the other thing that can affect how much speed you have is how many data streams can happen at the same time, and then how much data can be packed into that data stream. One of the features that was introduced in Wi-Fi 5 Wave 2 was called MIMO, or multi-user, multi-input, multi-output. Someone should look into the name, but it helps multiple devices transmit or receive data at the same time. Wi-Fi 6 allows 8 simultaneous data streams, 4 for upload and 4 for download. Whereas you can see by the time you get to Wi-Fi 7, you could have up to 16. The other term is called data density, and it's shown as QAM on charts. Now, QAM started with Wi-Fi at Wi-Fi 4, and it means they can pack more signals and therefore more bits of zeros and ones into the same combined wireless signal. It takes a lot of mathematics to explain, and actually I'll leave a link to a wonderful explanation of QAM that I found when I was refreshing my own knowledge on the subject. What this results in is the same signal being sent with more data packed into it, and that's why we call it data density. Now, you could see the improvement over the different Wi-Fi standards, and again, this results in the most speed with Wi-Fi 7. There's one big real-world change, and this is a feature that was introduced in Wi-Fi 7. It's called MLO, or multi-link operation. And with my system from TP-Link, I was able to broadcast a Wi-Fi 7 MLO network. And when you look at my phone, when it's connected to that network, it's connected to both 5 and 6 gigahertz frequencies. This improves speeds a lot, and I'll explain more later. And finally, latency is the term they use to describe how long a signal takes to travel across a network. Wi-Fi 7 has been specifically produced to allow you to use things like virtual reality because of its extremely low latency. Let's get to the real-world results we found. I'm going to break this down by the 3 biggest aspects of any Wi-Fi system: speed, reliability, and coverage. Now, I used 2 sets of Wi-Fi mesh systems from TP-Link to cover my 1,600 square foot home. That square footage is on the top 2 levels, and it doesn't include the basement that we're in now. I did cover the basement, and I tested that with these systems. If you want to see how I design my network, you can check out the part 1 video from this series. I also did test Google's Nest Wi-Fi Pro, but you'll see as we go, those results were not as good, and you'll find out why. But let's start by talking about the first and most important thing for most people: speed. I did tests all throughout my home. I was up and down stairs for weeks testing this stuff, so it's been a good workout. Now, I did standardize some of the tests with a consistent set of Android phones and a single tool to report the results. But understand, I checked these results with other devices like streaming sticks and with additional tools. Our results show the story from a consistent set of tests, but we checked our results. Now, moving up from Wi-Fi 5 to Wi-Fi 7, it's pretty clear that average speeds get faster. You'll also notice a pretty big change between Google's Nest Wi-Fi Pro and this Deco XE70 Pro. And that's just on Wi-Fi 6. So even though these 2 systems are both capable of Wi-Fi 6 and 6E, we did find different speeds. More on why that is in a bit. Now, there's a little blip here between Wi-Fi 6 and 6E where the average speeds did not increase. When I add in the maximum speeds we found of each Wi-Fi standard into this chart, things get closer to what we'd expect. However, you might be noticing that I'm not getting anywhere near the speeds theoretically possible. Why is that? Well, our ISP is only providing me a max of 960 megabits per second of internet speed, which means when I'm measuring my speed, that's about the max I can get. You do see times where I get a bit more though. But this is an important consideration when you're deciding if you need extra speed from your Wi-Fi system. Now, the other consideration is internal network speed. So this is the stuff happening inside your home. I was getting between 3 and 5 times faster speeds internally with Wi-Fi 7. This is a big benefit to me. I do lots of file transfer through my home network, and I was able to find an adapter for a Wi-Fi 7 card going into my PC. So if you're running things like home servers, it could be a big benefit to you. But let's address the Wi-Fi 6 versus 6E elephant in the room. Wi-Fi 6 was generally faster than Wi-Fi 6E. So why is that? Now, this was an average test, okay? So I was testing all over my home. I was trying to create real world conditions. But in creating an average, I skewed this specific result. Now, what we found was that Wi-Fi 6E was faster within 15 feet of our TP-Link mesh points. So because Wi-Fi 6E uses 6 gigahertz, I was forcing that connection all through my home to create this average speed value. So you'll see in a bit how distance really affects this technology, and that's why we're getting the results we are. So I think on average, most of you won't notice big differences between 6 and 6E. But when you use it right, you use something like a Fire TV Cube within about 15 feet, you're going to take full advantage of that standard. Why did Wi-Fi 7 do so much better than the others? Well, we've already explored how channel bandwidth and data density and some other things help Wi-Fi 7 do that. But I think the most important component of this is what's called the MLO network. Now, this was such a great feature to find on the TP-Link Wi-Fi 7 mesh system. They have this option to broadcast an MLO network, and that broadcast at both 5 and 6 gigahertz frequencies. So my phone was connected to both of those, and often I would get back a speed that was faster than my ISP's max. And again, we have to ask why that's happening. So, Google's Nest Wi-Fi Pro has a maximum speed of AXE 5400. It's actually different outside of the USA. We'll talk about that in a second. TP-Link's system here, the Deco XE70 Pro, has a max speed of AXE 4900. And the Deco BE63s with Wi-Fi 7 have a maximum speed of BE 10,000. But those maximum speeds don't tell you all the details. Your speed is actually broken up by radio frequency. Here's how these all look. So first of all, you'll notice that the Nest Wi-Fi Pro suddenly has different rates outside of the US. That was a big deal for my testing results. But the other thing you'll notice is how much speed they can now give you on these Wi-Fi 7 systems. This is all related to the new technologies being packed into the new standard. And the biggest units I've seen are the BE95s, a lot like these, but they have wild numbers. I don't even know what to do with that much speed. Now, getting back to that MLO network though, what you're doing by connecting to two of those frequencies at the same time is giving yourself access to all of that combined speed, or at least what's available when you go to use it. Now that's why I continue to press up against the maximum speed my ISP is giving me, and why internally, inside of my network, I was able to get such higher speeds. To me, that feature alone is worth a lot. But let's talk about coverage and a little bit about interference. Coverage from a Wi-Fi system is usually stated on the marketing pages, but that often refers to Wi-Fi at just 2.4 gigahertz. It doesn't really apply to 5 and 6 gigahertz, and there's actually a much bigger difference between the frequencies than there is between any system or any Wi-Fi standard. So you can see my results as I went through my home and measured the signal strength. And understand, the materials in my home, they're fairly simple. Almost all the measurements we did were in open air with nothing in between us and our mesh points. So, anytime you're getting under minus 70 dBm, your signal strength is probably not good enough for solid Wi-Fi connectivity, and you can't call that covered anymore. This is a lot of the reason that we found Wi-Fi 6E underperforming versus Wi-Fi 6 in that average test. We were forcing the use of that 6 gigahertz frequency, and you can see that as a signal, it falls off faster than even 5 gigahertz. Signal strength is something that results in changes in speed and in reliability. So this is something to really pay attention to when you're designing your network, or where you're going to place your Wi-Fi points. Now, what I was impressed with was that we could get 25 feet out from a 6 gigahertz point from TP-Link, and that meant I could almost get all the way throughout my home before I was running into trouble with that 6 gigahertz network. I just had to locate these mesh points in the middle of my home, and then the only real trouble I ran into was trying to use that 6 gigahertz outside of my home. So when we talk about coverage, the more important aspect of this is interference. Interference will essentially stop your coverage, and where we see the most interference is at 2.4 gigahertz. We even have things like microwaves that can interfere with Wi-Fi at that frequency. And there are tons of other wireless technologies that use that frequency, like Bluetooth on this hub here. So it was important when the Wi-Fi standards started to add 5 gigahertz, but it's even more important now with the opportunity to use 6 gigahertz. Personally, I have found it's been very positive to move things over to 5 and 6 gigahertz as much as I can. Around my home, I see far less networks at those frequencies, and I'm able to easily avoid my neighbors because those signals aren't traveling nearly as far. Reliability of your Wi-Fi comes down to a few things. Now, the first is the system you're using, and if you pick wrong, kiss reliability goodbye. I personally was not sure about TP-Link's networking equipment till I tried them for this video, but both of these systems have been highly reliable, and features they give you, like resetting your system every night on a schedule, wireless and wired backhaul, having an IoT specific network, and the detailed network management options have made these highly reliable for 3 months. And that's how long I left each of these systems running in my home. And I have over 100 Wi-Fi devices on my system at any given time. So I'm trying to tell you, this was a pretty serious test, and these held up. Now, one of the things that people miss about these systems is just how busy they are. And it's where a lot of the cost comes in. Companies actually have to pack a lot of processing power and a lot of radios into systems like this. Wi-Fi routers and mesh systems are very busy. Not only are they handling those data streams, but they do something that's a bit unique to Wi-Fi. I say it's unique because some of the other wireless technologies we use in the smart home don't do this kind of a thing. So your Wi-Fi router or point has to communicate with each device it's connected to. So it checks on the device to see that it's still there. This is a security thing, and it goes around to each device that's on the network and checks to see if it gets a response. All of that has to go on, plus the actual streaming and data that's being passed along. This results in companies who do testing to see how many devices these can hold on to. And these systems from TP-Link say they can hold up to 200 devices. And again, I have 100 or more on here. But in comparison, if you look at an Eero system today, they'll hold between 75 and 100 devices. Now, if you remember from earlier, Wi-Fi 7 can hold on and run up to 16 streams at the same time. This is dependent on the number of radios a point has. You'll see this on the specifications like this. Usually looks like 2x2 at 2.4 and 2x2 at 5 and maybe 2x2 at 6. What that's actually saying is that they have 2 send and 2 receive radios at each of those frequencies. So let's pretend that more than 2 devices are trying to send information at exactly the same moment on the 2.4 frequency. That's essentially going to fill up the receive radios at that frequency, and it creates a backlog. And then if you consider what I just said about checking on each device, there's a lot going on here. So obviously, as you get more devices connected to your Wi-Fi network, those extra data stream options are really important. Being able to balance your data streaming across the different frequencies is also really important. This helps you from creating backlogs in your system. So Wi-Fi 6E and 7 allow you to take advantage of this through that third frequency. In the end, what I've found is extra reliability from these systems with Wi-Fi at 6 gigahertz. That's because I've been able to shift some of that load onto the 6 gigahertz frequency. And I'm sure that as we go forward and get even faster systems with more radios, this is going to get better for us. It's especially important in smart homes where we have so many IoT devices that sit at 2.4 gigahertz. If you can get the other stuff offloaded to 5 and 6, it's really gonna benefit you. One thing I wanna point out about these systems from TP-Link that I think really affects my reliability has been the wireless plus the wired backhaul feature. Now, what backhaul is the data that has to be transferred between your mesh points, or basically around your network. If you have to use the Wi-Fi signals to transmit this data, you can tie up a lot of resources. And we just talked about the amount of radios and the amount of concurrent streams that can take place. So the fact that these systems let me use a wired backhaul is a huge benefit because it means all the traffic going between my mesh points is using Ethernet cables in my wall. The really cool feature from TP-Link is that they can use wireless and wired, and they manage that for you. So they're balancing your network in order to achieve reliability and maximum speed. Comparing some of the most popular systems out there today, it's pretty obvious we're going to pay a premium for Wi-Fi 7 and to some extent still for Wi-Fi 6E. The question becomes, is it worth it to pay that extra money? And I'm just going to go to what I've experienced personally because you've already seen the test results. But for me, I don't think it's worth it anymore to go and buy a Wi-Fi 6 system. A lot of the Wi-Fi 6 only systems that you can buy today have very low speeds and can't hold on to a lot of devices. And as people who are building smart homes, we're likely to have a lot of products that we want to put on our Wi-Fi. That's especially true with the Matter standard using Wi-Fi heavily. I think the other important aspect of a lot of those systems is that they don't do the backhaul as well as these new systems do. And the opening of that 6 gigahertz frequency is letting me balance my home much better. I've been able to move over streaming with the Fire TV Cube, my phone and my computer with that PC adapter. That's taken a lot of the bandwidth off of the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz that would be my only choice with a Wi-Fi 6 system. So it's okay if you have one of those systems today, but if you're starting to look at an upgrade, the question is, do you go with Wi-Fi 6E or 7? For those of you that are budget conscious, Wi-Fi 6E is going to do a lot to allow you to balance out your network, like I just said, and you get access to a lot of extra speeds with systems like the Deco XE70 Pros here. As you can take lots of those big streaming devices, move them on to 6 gigahertz, and doing that with this system instantly helped the reliability of my Wi-Fi network, and it made things like streaming cameras on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz faster and more reliable. For those of you that have a little extra room in the budget, I cannot state this enough, you should be going with Wi-Fi 7. The premium is there for this new technology. You're gonna pay more, so maybe you wait for a deal. I came into this video thinking, I'll just go back to Google's Nest Wi-Fi Pro because this had been a very reliable system for me. But I will never touch those again. That's it. It stays there. The benefits of Wi-Fi 7 and the overall speed of these systems from TP-Link are incredible. So you can check out the links to TP-Link's Wi-Fi systems you saw here today. Plus, the other parts of this networking series on Automate Your Life is on screen right now. Those videos will help to guide you further on your journey to make your home network amazing, especially if you have a smart home. Otherwise, thanks for watching today, and of course, live smart.